Hello to all our Parenting Matters followers. It's Nikki Bush and I'm here with Bev Malone, who is a qualified optometrist and does a lot of work with children. There have been some questions recently around Irlen lenses, around biohacking of the brain using red lenses so that kids get to sleep better. So I thought there would be nobody better than Bev to chat to and see what her thoughts are on these matters. So Bev, over to you. What's the difference between using coloured lenses for Irlen syndrome and coloured lenses for going to sleep?
Okay, great question. So the coloured lenses for going to sleep is part of a theory around biohacking to relax the brain or improve the brain to make it do its optimal thing. So when you're using red lenses, you're doing it particularly to help create the illusion that it's becoming nighttime. It dims the light around you, it slows down the light coming into the eye, and the brain goes, oh, it's nighttime, right, let me start producing melatonin.
Okay, so that's the hormone or the chemical?
That's the chemical in the brain that we naturally produce to help us sleep.
Okay.
Now some people today don't produce enough or are not producing it properly, etc. Those glasses are thought to help to induce that kind of production.
Okay, so question here. Do screens and working on screens and playing with screens, whether it's TV, whether it's a computer or anything like that, does that impact on the melatonin production?
Okay, so it does. It induces the production of melatonin. Why? Because bright light, particularly in the blue side of the spectrum where white light is, bright light stimulates the brain, particularly coming off the screens. So it's part of a visual hygiene program, I like to call it, is to make certain that your screen is at the minimal comfortable brightness that you can see what you need to see without straining your eyes.
Okay, so make it as dim as you can, but still be able to see.
Correct. So I would take it all the way to darkness to start with, and then slowly lift it by 5 or 10%, check it. Not comfortable. Keep going, keep going. By the time you get to really comfortable, you're half of where you used to always use it.
As in, I know that I default to very bright.
Correct, and most people do.
Yeah, because you think you're going to see better.
Correct, but you actually induce a pupil constriction, which is part of the visual ability to see for long. We use a lot of different factors. One of them is the pupil size. When you make the pupil constrict because the light is too bright, it actually triggers other things to happen which cause eye strain. So you
get more tired, your visual system gets more tired?
Yes, it can get a lot more fatigued, yet the brain's getting stimulated.
That's
so it's
what I was
hard
about
to
to
get
say.
tired to sleep.
So you can't drop.
Correct. And so the visual hygiene mixes in with what we now know is termed sleep hygiene, and to try and get away from that level of stimulation for a good hour before you go to bed so that your brain can start to settle, make the melatonin because it knows it's night, and you can have a good sleep.
So you've got all the right things happening in the brain and the body so that you can get that and that drop when you get into bed.
Absolutely.
And that means that both adults and children need to be off screens about an hour before they go to bed.
So I think it's unrealistic to expect anyone to do that in today's time, but if we can do it cleverly, then we can really maximize the amount of visual hygiene and sleep hygiene you can get done an hour before bedtime for yourself and for children by minimizing the brightness, number one, making certain your vision apnea is supported and it's very clear and comfortable. And the third thing would be to change over on many of the screens today. We can do that if it's going to be a bit of screen time before you sleep, which most of us do, is to change it over to the night vision, because that is like a yellow light base and it's much softer.
What do you mean? There's a setting on the phones? There's a setting on tablets and everything?
Yes, there's a setting on
so
almost
all
of them
vision
today.
setting.
And you can change the contrast to come up with this gentle yellow contrast. So when you've dimmed it and it's comfortable and you add that in, it is a very gentle way to read, and then it's not that different from reading on a Kindle or in an actual book, which everyone says is great before you sleep, and most people get a good 2 lines read if they go to bed.
So I heard there was another way to biohack the brain for sleep, and that is to paint your light bulbs orange.
Similar effect you're creating
the yellow
by changing the light colour in the room and triggering hopefully the circadian rhythm to say, oh, it's sleep time, best we make melatonin.
Okay. Parenting Matters group, we've had some questions about what Irlen syndrome is and what Irlen lenses are used for. So I thought I'd ask my friend and colleague Bev Malone, who's a qualified optometrist, to give us some insight into this, because it seems that it is rearing its head. It's kind of one of those things that goes away and then comes back in popularity, and right now obviously people are talking about it again. So Bev, what is Irlen syndrome?
Irlen syndrome is, the definition, strict definition, is that people experience visual perception of black print on white light differently.
Okay.
And some people see it as stressful.
So that stark contrast between black and white might be too much for some people.
And it might be causing strain for the person.
And if you overlaid a different color lens, and you showed me just now pink over the white page, and immediately I kind of went, oh, that's actually quite comfortable. Look, pink is also my favorite color.
Okay, that might swing it a bit.
But it kind of felt easier on the eye. And you've got how many different coloured lenses that you can prescribe?
Well, that depends on which system you use, because there's a lot of different companies that are producing the overlays now. So there's as few as 9 and as many as in the 20s. So it just depends.
Wow.
And also there's blends. So it depends who's making the colour filter. And generally it was done in lenses. So it was put into the glasses, and then there would be an implication for adults or children walking around with a certain colour lens that wouldn't be normal, like a usual, because usual is clear, or outdoors a sunglass, but a green lens or a purple lens, not so usual.
Look a little different.
Right, so it's not aesthetically simple. Okay. But the whole idea behind it is that if we can identify what colour is comfortable for this person to read with and process in their brain cognitively as fast as possible for them, then we can assist them and reduce the visual stress and reduce the concentration issues, because if you're concentrating too much to see, that's a problem.
Then you're not actually focusing on the learning, because you're focusing on the actual physiological, how do I see?
Exactly, that's the theory behind the Irlen syndrome, but it is controversial, and it is not stated as absolute fact. It is taught in certain places around the world. It is utilized in certain optometric practices, and where it can add value, I think, is when a person has had a fully comprehensive binocular vision assessment. Right. And
binocular vision meaning both eyes need to team and work together well.
Correct.
Right.
Exactly. Okay. Perfect.
And
perfect.
I have eyes that don't do that, so I actually know about this.
Okay, so that, yes, well, that's actually a perfect definition. It's the definition of what is really good vision. Okay. If we just have people who are practicing with the Irlen color overlays, and they are not optometrists who have a special interest in visual balancing and adults or children binocular vision, and it's just pediatrics has a much broader scope to it than just visual balancing, but there's a huge amount in visual balancing that is necessary. And I would say the clearest definition of it is like this. People think good vision is, well, you can see fine, you can see to read, so you're fine.
Yes.
That's not good vision. By my definition, good vision is that you're able to see well at near and see well at far, and do so for as long as you want to without eye strain, getting tired, or getting eye pain or headaches. That's good vision.
That's good vision.
Right.
So if somebody actually had Irlen syndrome, how would they see the page? Because when I did a little bit of research, it talked about floating words, washing out of the background or of the print, rivers of words. There were some really descriptive things, fuzzy and blurry, and it sounds like there are about 20 different things that could be happening.
Skipping words, rereading text, getting confused, not being able to concentrate on the paragraph, and these are also all symptoms of eye strain and visual imbalance.
So it might not be Irlen syndrome.
Correct.
It could just be a visual system that is very stressed and strained, and it could be a number of different things, which is why you're saying that children need a proper optometric assessment.
Everybody does.
Everybody
but
does.
Yes, children, especially from the youngest age possible, should be assessed. In the same way, we have hearing tested children's hearing is tested today predominantly just after they come into the world. We're having screenings done.
Well, going back to the screenings for ears and for eyes, often preschools bring in an optometrist once a year to screen all the kids. Now, my kids were part of that system, and I have to say that I also went for private assessments as well, because I found that things were not picked up in those assessments, that often detail was missed. So the general vision was fine, but the deep assessment wasn't happening. I know the difference because I've seen the two. So do you recommend that parents do their own private assessments? Would that be a fair question?
I think that it's essential that children have a fully comprehensive pediatric binocular vision assessment to make certain that their visual system isn't just capable of seeing far and near and a bit of 3D and color, but that its functionality is checked and that we know that child has the best possible visual ability to be in a classroom, or adult has the best possible visual ability to be behind a desk. But if we ignore that, right, the screening may pick it up, it may not. But when you have a one-on-one with an optometrist who has a real special interest in binocular vision and pediatrics, and they're devoted to figuring all of those steps out, then when you get to the end of those assessments, it's one-on-one. The child hasn't watched a whole slew of their friends being tested, picked up on this or that, maybe got a bit bored, just wants to play once more. There's too many factors that make it an absolutely definite answer. This kid has a problem or this kid doesn't. And I've seen many children, and I'm going to say it with a preface, I think these screenings are a good thing.
Yes.
But I've seen many children who've been referred because of X, Y, and Z, and actually when they've had a full assessment, there is no concern.
Okay.
And sometimes there's a concern around this and there's a different issue actually.
Okay.
But the bottom line is it's a screener, and isn't it great that it'll pick up a couple of children who would have been missed otherwise, because we wait too long to test our children's eyes. And if we were doing that, we wouldn't have to worry.
Yeah, and also thinking about how plastic and elastic the brain is at an early age. The earlier we pick up the issues, the more we can create the right kind of intervention early, so that perhaps children aren't left in glasses for too long. Maybe it's a short-term intervention, maybe it's some exercises and some glasses, because we know that those little tiny little ice cream cone type exercises, which are all about tracking and focal depth. Tracking, by the way, is being able to track from left to right, like we read from left to right, checking that your eyes aren't jumping and missing words along the way. Those sort of things done early can really help a child, and that boosts their self-esteem, their self-confidence, and their ability to concentrate, of course.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think the bottom line then becomes, when should we start testing children? We should test them from 2 years old. There should be a basic visual screening done by somebody with a special interest in that area. And you can do a full assessment from about 3.5 and up. So I have seen children as young as 4, and they've picked up a problem in one eye.
Okay.
But by the time they're 7, they don't have it anymore because we've been able to work with it.
So you've remediated it, you've intervened.
Because of what you're saying. Because of
the brain
elasticity.
The brain has fixed the issue.
100%. The brain's happy to learn a new way to use itself, and we can use it then. Yeah. When we get past 8 or 9, we start to have an inelasticity developing, and it gets harder to work with the brain and say, well, could you just run some tracks this way, use that eye a bit more, a little bit harder then. So the earlier we pick it up, the better. So where these screenings are amazing is that they force into the system the individualizing of the eyes. So they say, can you see with this one? Can you see with that one? Where a lot of people don't do that until that happens, and they go, oh my word, how's that possible that I can't see, right?
Yeah.
And that happens with adults. When was your first eye test? I'll ask them, I've never had a full eye test.
Wow.
But it's a sense, and you use it all day, every day.
Yes.
And you've never had it checked out to make sure it's good.
Yeah.
So there's an assumption that until your eyes fail you, you don't need to have them tested.
Yeah.
And I think that is a misperception out there. And if we don't have it tested properly, well, then we may not be getting the right answer either.
Of course.
So a screening is not an answer. It's a precursor to find somebody who has a real issue, who would not otherwise be checked. But should we be checking children from about 2.5 to 3 years old if we haven't noticed any problem? Yes.
100%,
course.
100%, because
course.
their eyes are essential to being able to learn in a classroom.
Exactly.
And
exactly.
without good vision, learning becomes difficult, and then they might develop an aversion to learning and
Correct.
aversion to school because it's just so darn difficult.
And they're not able to concentrate for long because the tracking gets compromised if I can't see properly.
Yeah.
But as an adult, if I couldn't see comfortably for 20 minutes, I can tell you I wouldn't force myself to work for an hour. I'd
Yes.
take a break and go get coffee.
But you see,
They can't, so they look like they're not concentrating.
and then they get misdiagnosed maybe as ADD,
Sometimes.
ADHD, or
Sometimes.
many other things, of course, because the eyes are just so integral to everything.
Correct.
So why not give your child the best start in their learning journey and make sure that they get their eyes tested?